is.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't. Like I said, I got home and I have been sitting at the computer with everything shut off except the video editing software. That's where I've been all day today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Weekly Roundtable. I'm Frank Johnson, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation and host of the Range Report on YouTube. To my right or the left, depending upon what side of the TV you're looking at, is Michael Marshall, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation, constitutional expert, and my good friend. And I'm very happy to be here. And it looks like this evening it's just going to be Michael and I as the rest of
Vass says he's on his way.
Vass is on the way. Well, he is in New York City, so you never know what's happening down there.
No, you don't.
Well, we've had a rather eventful week.
As usual, and it's like I said, this year's going to be a shit show, and it's going to get worse. Before we get started too far into this, I want to remind everybody, please like, share, and subscribe to us. This really helps us get the word out. The more people that see this, the more people that we have liking and sharing and commenting on our posts, the more engagement we see, and that also means more other people will see us. That is the only way, since we are actually being subdued, that we can actually override the algorithms. So, folks, your comments and everything do help to get us to get around that. So that being said,
even if you disagree with us,
well, exactly. Okay. Invite others to disagree with us.
Now, I don't know why anybody would disagree with us when we're so studious and correct, like 103% of the time. But that's, hey, to each his own. Who am I to say?
Well, actually, between the three of us, we're correct 300% of the time.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, the only time I was ever wrong is one time when I thought I made a mistake.
Yeah.
So what's
so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's been making the rounds, and a lot of the prepping community, a lot of the conspiracy theorists, and etc. are going on and on and on about the Francis Scott Key Bridge and how they're claiming that there's explosions, and you can see the explosions in the videos and all this stuff. And okay, number one, I work with electricity. That's my profession. Okay. Primarily I work with electronics, typically low voltage systems, but we also do work with high voltage from time to time. That being said, the people that are claiming this do not understand that there are major power lines going across that bridge. Number one, to power items that are required for bridge maintenance, bridge upkeep, bridge lighting, and so forth. But also there are major supply lines for the power grid that are going across that bridge. So the flashes that you see that you think are explosions are high voltage lines being severed rather dramatically, and that's creating a plasma. No, I don't think anything exploded in any of the cargo containers, or at least nothing that I've seen. It is possible that some of those cargo containers could have been carrying lithium-ion batteries too, which, again, if those get crushed, those are going to look like an explosion as well. Honestly, I don't think that there were any charge. I definitely don't believe there's any charges set on the bridge itself. There are some rumors going around that the navigation system was hacked on the container ship. How credible that is, I don't know. A lot depends on how old the container ship is, number one. And number two, how many of those systems have active connections to them while they're actually en route. Yeah, Chinese electric cars. Very good possibility of that. So I don't think that, honestly, a lot of the conspiracy theories, if you actually look into them, if you actually think about it critically, are going to hold up. The only one that could potentially hold up is that they intentionally drove it into the bridge. I don't buy that either, considering they're in the video. You can see at least two times when they had a complete loss of power. And after the power was restored from the first outage, you can see that the smoke from their stack comes out thick and black, meaning that they are trying to push as much power as they could to their nav system to try to correct it from when it started veering off when they lost power the first time.
And people have to remember, and this is where I have a little expertise because I worked on those ships for a while. You're talking about a container ship that is larger than the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about 1,200 feet of steel that is moving along in, it's not necessarily a still body of water either. There's a current.
No. Right.
And when you have these waterways that have been dredged out, in order to have container ships pass through them and to get under the bridges, the current in the middle of those passages, have you ever heard the phrase, still waters run deep? Those current might look still underneath on the top, but right underneath the surface of that water, you're talking about immense flow of water that not only are the ships trying to push their way through, they're trying to steer their way through. The minute you lose steering on any of these vessels, it's all bets are off. The current is now in command, and you have a rudder on these ships. Now, most modern ships today, especially your cruise liners and everything, they have what they call pods. They're like jet engines under the water, and they'll have two in the stern, two in the bow. They protrude down below the hull of the ship, and they help navigate the ship around. They drive them left and right. And you also have your main drive screw in the back of the ship. Your rudder for these ships is about 30 feet wide from the back of the ship to the back of the ship. If you're looking at it sideways, you're talking 30 feet wide, and you're talking 3-4 stories tall for one of these things. That's how much mass has to be in the water to be able to turn, to control the current, to determine which way that ship is going to go. Those rudders don't turn like the steering wheel of your car. You just don't zip, 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 zip. When you lose power, if that rudder is in one direction or another, that's where it's staying. It's stay. So if you're driving your car and you lose power and you're in the middle of a turn, if you let go of the steering wheel, this car will generally self-correct. The wheels will straighten out and your car will start driving straight. These ships, when that rudder stops, that's it. That's the position that it's in. Now you kick the power back on and you put full power to the screw. Now you're putting all that force right into the rudder, and you're going to even more dramatically make the ship alter course.
Well,
and it's very hard to correct that course.
And like you said, you have those pods that help with the steering that are underneath. Depending on what orientation those are in, once those start engaging again, that again could cause that issue as well.
Right. Now, we don't know if the ship in question had those on them. I know that this ship, from what I understand, has had some problems in the past, according to some of the reports that have come out. This particular ship has had some critical failures in recent years. I don't necessarily know if it has those pods. I don't even know if it was being piloted by what they call a port captain. We usually, when these ships come into port, you'll have a small boat that'll take a port captain and will drive him out to the boat, goes up a Jacob's ladder. He takes control of the ship, or she takes control of the ship, depending upon. Once that ship comes into port, because the port captain, that's all they do. They drive the ship down into the port and they oversee the docking. Same thing when they leave. When the ship leaves berth and it leaves, the port captain is in control of the ship until they get out into the navigable waterways, where he hands control back over to the seaward captain, and then the port captain leaves the ship. They go down, they get on a little boat and back over to land again. I don't know if it was I don't know if that was the procedure with this ship. Was it the captain driving the ship? Was it a port captain driving the ship? I couldn't see any evidence of them being tugs. You know, that
there were the tugs had just disengaged from it not too long, and once they had the first power outage, the tugs immediately turned around and headed towards the container ship under full steam to try to help it, to try to assist, and they weren't able to catch up to it.
Well, if you know anything about tugboats, you know two things about tugboats. They're slow and they're heavy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the reason a tugboat,
they don't turn that easily.
No, the little tugboats will turn on a dime, but them turning a ship on a dime, not going to happen. You're talking about immensely powerful little boats that are super duper heavy. They use mass and inertia in order to push these boats around, but they don't have speed. They're not designed for that. They're designed for the brute force of pushing or pulling. Once that tugboat is behind the ship, if that ship is either under its own power or is being carried by the current, those tugboats are going to have a hard time catching up with it. You know, now somebody said that the ship had dropped anchor in order that they were trying to slow it down. This is one report that I heard, was that the ship dropped anchor.
I've heard that too.
Slow it down, and that produced a yaw, which pulled it to the port side, and that redirected it into the bridge. I don't know. We're probably not going to have a couple of answers for at least another few weeks. NTSB, the Coast Guard, they're all going to have to determine what's going on. The question is, at this point, why are they saying it's going to take 10 years to rebuild that bridge? That's the question. Oh, that's right. I forgot. Government.
Well, it's only government, and that's part of the reason why the bridge fell down. Sorry, I got here a little bit late. But what we know for sure is that there's been you probably covered this, several times the bridge has been, there have been crashes into the bridge. And yet, with all the infrastructure from the Obama administration, the infrastructure deal by the Biden administration this last year, where's all this infrastructure that's supposed to be fixing these bridges? I mean, if they had been actually fixing this bridge on a regular basis, like they promised, then wouldn't it have been able to survive this? Because it survived several other crashes previously. It's government getting in the way of actually doing the job because they're kicking it down the road. They don't want to fix this. They want this problem.
And also the federal governments came out that they are going to pay for everything to rebuild it and all that.
Well,
why isn't the number one, the insurance company for the owner of the container ship, why aren't they on the hook?
Well, they're not saying they're
number
not
two, the insurance company for the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which it was under some type of insurance. Why aren't they on the hook?
Well, look, the bridge is part of the federal interstate highway system. So the first people that are going to step in to do any major repair is going to be the federal government. The federal government is going to oversee all of that stuff. And then they'll figure out who the parties responsible for the payment is going to be. We're probably going to be on the hook for it anyway, because I'm sure somebody will forgive some debt or some bullshit that has something to do with it. But for now, I mean, if we're going to wait for somebody else to pay for it, it's not going to get paid for. So this is one of those circumstances where the government is going to just have to step in and do the heavy lifting until they figure out who the responsible parties are.
Yeah, but the problem isn't that part of it. Fine, someone else may come in with some money as well, but really the problem is the promises of fixing the infrastructure that we have heard from the Obama administration, that we've heard from the Biden administration, the hundreds, literally, about combining the two, over $1 billion that they have promised would go into shovel-ready jobs to take care of this very problem. The bridges, the roads, this is what they spent over $1 billion, several billion at this point, specifically for this. Where's the result? They have failed. They love to give us the promise. They fail to have any result to be effective or efficient, and then they expect that they will not be held accountable. That's why it's going to take so long to fix this. And I am terrified that when they do build the new bridge, it's going to be worse than the old bridge, that it won't even be able to survive anything.
Well, here's what's really interesting on this. Okay, is the construction started on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The original construction started in August of 1972. It was opened March 23rd, 1977. So less than 5 years it was constructed from the ground up.
Yeah.
Okay, so that it's going to take 10 years to redo this, I'm not buying that. Also, $60 million is what they're claiming. Well, that's what they've already started, or have already released for this.
It's going to cost over $100 million. It's going to easily cost over $100 million. They built a website that cost hundreds of millions and failed the day that it was open to the public, actually for several weeks. That's the Obamacare website. We spent over $100 million on it. It failed. We knew it was going to fail, and it failed the moment they opened it. This is, again, kicking the can down the road, where they're letting all of the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness of government is why we're having this problem. They could build the bridge in 5 years easily. They did it in the first place. Other bridges and other public resources have been built in that time or less and have stood the time of decades, in some cases, hundreds of years, that we've had these things around. They can get it done. They don't want to get it done. It's good for the unions for it to take longer. It's good for their various politicians to run on re-election and to gain more money because of that.
Jobs.
Theoretically, it creates jobs, yeah. And those jobs are going to get overtime and extensions because none of it's going to be done effectively. That's the problem that this highlights. That's why this happened in the first place. Was the driver, I mean, when I first saw the news, the very first thing I said that day, and I had it on Twitter, was, oh my God, this feels like it's 9/11 all over again. Why? Because of the suddenness, the unexpectedness, the collapse of something that you did not expect to collapse, that should have been built, engineered to be able to withstand that impact. And theoretically, it would have, except just like the Twin Towers were built to survive one plane actually hitting them, and they would have survived. It got hit twice. Well, this bridge was built to survive being hit by a barge. It's been hit by several and never fixed. And that's why it failed.
Let's not forget, too, that you said this bridge was designed and begun construction in 1972, right?
Yeah.
All right. How big was the largest container ships in 1972? About a third the size of what they are today.
Yeah.
about a third the size. So you're talking about a bridge that was built to withstand impacts from something substantially smaller than what actually hit the boat. The only thing that kept that thing going for all these years was the fact that it wasn't hit more often by anything larger. You're talking when these kind of suspension bridges, they're very delicate. If you just look at the structure of these things, they're very delicate. They're not really intended to take lateral collisions at the bases of them.
No, they're not. They're
They're
designed to
designed-
support weight up, not sideways.
Right. They're designed to hold a compressive weight. The more weight goes on top of the bridge, the more it compresses, the stronger it goes. It's like an arch, like a Roman arch. The Romans knew how to do it all those years ago. There's the arch right in the middle. The more weight that bears down, the stronger that arch is going to get. But if you hit that from the side, what are you going to get? Now, you look at the caissons
right
on
there. Okay. For those of you that aren't actually watching the video, I'm showing the video of the bridge being struck. Okay, so at 1:24 a.m., you can see that the container ship was heading towards this central area of the bridge, and that's when it had its first power loss.
Well, here's another reason why I thought this was very similar to 9/11, because
Okay.
we have seen that the I forget the term of it, but basically hacking. That we've seen international hackers have gone after individual power plant structures, devices throughout the nation to shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? And we don't know yet. It still hasn't been confirmed yet, as far as I've seen in the news, that the ship, which would have been under a GPS, which would have been connected internationally. So if someone hacked it, turned off the power, including the GPS, the ship no longer has the guidance that it normally would have. This could have been an attack. And this is the result of that.
And that's one of the things that we will find out in the coming days.
And I think it may have been, which makes me think it's more like 9/11, something we never expected to be attacked, something that we never expected to have the impact if it was attacked as it is. I think that's the case. But go on. I'm sorry.
Well, the bad news is if it was, we're never going to know.
No, they'll never tell us. No.
So here, like I said, here's when it had its first power outage. Okay. And when it has that first power outage here, you can see that it's starting to lose its trajectory. You can actually see it starting to curve right after that power outage. Here, the power came back on. Okay. And right there, you can see the big, thick plume of smoke coming out of the stacks.
They're trying to correct
they are
their path.
trying to correct it. Now, if you look, they actually do start to correct it a little bit, and then they have their second power outage. And by that time, it's too late.
Well, that correction was an overcorrection.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they started to correct it and then they had the power outage, now you have it overcorrecting, drifting into what you're trying to correct. You're trying to turn the stern of that boat by 15 degrees and you want it to turn for 100 yards. Well, you just turned it at 15 degrees, but you're dead in the water for 300 yards.
Right.
So now the stern of that boat is swung around 45 degrees and power comes back on and it dries itself into the caisson of the bridge. Then if it was an attack, we're never going to know about it because no one in this administration is going to own up to the fact that we got hacked. Or because think about this. There are
the other thing.
thousands of ships every day coming in and out of our ports. You know how vulnerable?
Mm-hmm. That's my point. And to reassure everyone, they should clearly define, was it an attack, a hack that was directed at it? And if it was, how we can prevent it. If it wasn't, be definitive about that so that the public trust can be regained to some semblance, because we know this is something that happens on a regular basis. How many times have we seen the government get attacked and hacked on a regular basis? Private businesses, banks are hacked and attacked on a regular basis. A ship is no different than a banking location. They have a computer, they have a satellite uplink, they can be hacked too, just like anything else. We need that assurance in this world, especially when we are seeing so much directed against us. We want to have that assurance that this can't happen again for that reason.
No, also let's take into consideration too, if the hack was just to simply shut down the ship, then whoever, and because if they said we're going to shut down that ship so that it drifts off course, smacks into a bridge, and takes out the main artery for 1/3 of the Northeast shipping, that was one hell of a gamble that paid off, because you would have to have every star in line from here to the Milky Way galaxy to get all of that right in order to crash that ship. I mean, that's why it's like, well, okay, it goes out. You would have to have it so predictable that was going to happen. You can't. It's mathematically impossible to be able to say, okay, I'm going to shut that ship down and let it crash into the bridge. They don't know what you would have to calculate what the currents are, wind speeds, where the tugboats are, what the crew is doing, what position the ship is in, what speed, what knot that thing is going to be traveling, before it went. How much force that bridge could take. Is it going to drift and hit exactly where you want it to hit? There's too many factors to say that just hacking the ship caused it. Could it have hacked it? Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but the likelihood that this was the result of a hack, I'm just thinking that this was a ship that was very poorly maintained, probably by people who did not train for this kind of a scenario, and the worst possible outcome happened.
Okay, so the ship, now here's what we do know also about the ship. Okay, number one, is owned by Grace Ocean Private Limited. It was flagged in Singapore, and I don't remember who as Belgium owned the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the company's out of Belgium that owns the ship, but is flagged in Singapore. So honestly, other than being at an American port, the American authorities really had no authority much as to far as how often the ship needs to be inspected and so forth. It's also came out that this ship's been involved in other collisions prior to this one. This wasn't the first collision that it was involved with. So that being said, too, is this some nefarious act, or is this human error and mechanical errors as a part of the ship? It's also came out too, if people don't know it, there was a law in 1851 that limits liability of maritime accidents.
No, didn't know that.
Yes.
But we're paying for it either way.
Right.
And should we be paying for it? Again, which again goes back to, should we be paying for it? Where's this money coming from? And the answer is, of course, we're going to pay for it, because we were always going to pay for it. But are we paying for it effectively? Are we going to get something that's efficiently done, that is going to be a better bridge than what we had before? And the true answer is no. We're going to waste money. We're going to waste time. And odds are the bridge is not going to be as structurally sound as what we had in the first place. That's just the history. You're muted, Mike.
Well, we'll see what happens. Maybe if we're fortunate enough to get rid of the current administration and replace it with an
A
administration
lot of these will be
that has
put
a
in,
history.
put in place in the next couple months.
Well, let's say if we're fortunate to have a replacement administration that has a history of getting construction jobs done on time, under budget, and ahead of schedule, maybe maybe a little woman rink action could take place, and this bridge could be up in 3 years.
Well, if they don't get it up soon, okay, it's a major traffic congestion problem too.
Oh yeah, there's going to be lots of consequences, which we haven't even started talking about. But again, that's the next problem that we're going to hear. How much money do we have to give to take care of the congestion? How much is that going to commit to crime? And therefore, we got to pay for that. We should be planning for all that now. We should be hearing that from the mayor. We should be hearing that from the governor. We should be hearing that in Congress. That
Are they going
planning.
to set up temporary ferry services to help alleviate some of that congestion?
Well, there should be several plans at least talked about. I'm not saying that everyone has the answer or that everything they come up with will be the perfect answer, but why is it our politicians, and again, this is local, state, and federal, should all be having a conversation about potential plans and saying, hey, we're working through these different issues to try and find the best solution. We should be hearing about that now. We're not. They're not having the conversations together. They're not having the conversations about the consequences.
No,
They're not. They're dealing with, bridge, because it's got the news. We're not the bad guy, and we're going to kick this down the road. And no one is talking about, okay, and how do we alleviate every other problem that comes out of this problem?
Really, the only thing that's come out that I've seen from the Biden administration is, well, we're going to immediately release this amount of money for it. And that's it. That's been it.
No, that isn't it. And the other thing is the mayor isn't a DEI hire.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that they wanted to emphasize. We're going to throw money at it now, and the mayor isn't a DEI hire. So, you're all evil if you think that. Well, those weren't the arguments people are making. He's a piss poor mayor because he isn't coming up with a plan. He's not reassuring his people that he's aware of the consequences that will happen because of this, that he's working on the issue for these very obvious, very easily understood problems. We know congestion. We know crime. We know that it's going to put infrastructure burden on the entire region, possibly even food. We know these things.
Completely shut down that port too.
Right, which is
okay until they get the bridge out of the water.
Right. So now we're talking about business and how it's going to affect all the small businesses, people's employment. These are all we figured this out in 2 minutes that I've been talking about it. If I can come up with that many issues that we know are known consequences, how is it that the mayor, the governor, and the federal government aren't saying we are aware of that and we're planning for it? It doesn't take a lot to give people confidence about the future. You just have to be competent. That's it.
Well, and here's another thing. Okay. A mayor's an elected official. Okay. But every area of the United States has an office of emergency management. Every area of the United States. And they have a director of the office of emergency management. And it is their job to be able to, number one, build contingency plans for basically every type of disaster that could potentially happen. Okay. Bridge collapse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. A mayor is an elected official that is in office for X number of years, however long their term is, depending on the jurisdiction. These emergency management officers and directors are in there for multiple terms. Okay. They typically are appointed at some point in their career. They are appointed to that position, and they typically stay there until they are retired.
So you're talking about decades.
Mhm.
Individuals who have a plan or series of plans and are in place for a decade or several decades with staff that are equally in for presumably decades, that should be on top of this, that should be communicating to the three groups I'm talking about:
Right.
mayor, governor, federal. And they're not. And we should be, that's why I'm so dejected and so upset about this, is that these consequences, they plan for it. This is something that's in the playbook. There should be communication saying, don't worry, we've got a playbook. We understand the scope of the problem, or at least we believe we do, and we're going to be fixing this. We're going to be working with you. They're not.
And that's the stuff that we need to be hearing about. That's stuff that we need to be seeing on the press. And again, like you said, we're not hearing this stuff. Okay. And I don't necessarily fault the mayor as much as I do the Office of Emergency Management.
Well, no, I disagree with you there. I fault the mayor and I fault the governor, because I automatically, when an emergency happens, there are several protocols. We know certain calls get made immediately, certain meetings happen immediately. The superiors, whether it's a mayor or a governor, they're going to be getting at least synopsis of the meetings, of the footnotes, the cliff notes, the bullet points about what's the next procedure, what should we be looking for, what should we be aware of. They're getting that because it happens automatically. You know this more than I do, Mike. You work with emergency management. You know
I do.
that as soon as it happens, there are individuals who are tasked instantly. They're immediately put into place. They start taking steps. They start having the meetings. They start putting out bullet points on priorities. That happens automatically. That from that initial meeting, there is automatically messages that are sent out to the appropriate authorities, which would include the mayor, which would include the governor, which means they've had enough time to notify the public.
So for the state of Maryland, the Secretary of Emergency Management is Russell J. Strickland. Okay, we should be hearing from his office on a daily basis about what's going on, along with the governor, Wes Moore. Let's see. That was Baltimore, right?
Yeah. They're not ready for this. This is going to be such a mess. There's going to be unemployment. There's going to be crime. There's going to be overload of infrastructure. It's coming. It's coming.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the city of Baltimore, they're actually on their website, the latest tweet, which was March 28th. No drone zone. Temporary flight restrictions remain in place for the Key Bridge zone.
Like that's the biggest problem they have is a drone.
Yeah.
Seriously, show them. Put that up on share that. The biggest problem they have is people taking drone pictures or having drones fly over a bridge that's collapsed. That's
their latest tweet.
Well, I can't see anything. Try refresh.
It's right over here to the side.
Where?
You're not.
I don't even know how you get your page to look like that.
So basically, right here to the side, where I'm scrolling things up and down.
Okay.
It says from the MDTA, no drone zone. Temporary flight restrictions remain in place for the Key Bridge zone. This is an FAA restriction also. And then directly under that, Baltimore is strong, Maryland's is strong, and together we will help our communities recover from this unthinkable tragedy.
Okay, the second part's just useless crap. That's just usual poly speak about anything. That's meaningless. So the first part is one of their most immediate concerns is drones taking pictures of that. That's useless. That is not one of your first priorities.
Okay. I'm actually trying to find out who the
Well,
director
it is if you want to keep people from seeing what you're doing.
Well, there is that. Yeah, I know. And they're bringing a crane over. I saw someone who was an opinion piece on this. I forgot the link on it, but one of the things they said, well, let's take the opportunity, re-dredge the entire river so that we can make it deeper so that these ships can actually sail lower and be able to be under the bridge, which would help alleviate part of the problem since we have the opportunity. Rather than just trying to clear out the wreckage and build right over again, take the opportunity, dredge the river, give them a lower, give the ships an ability to be lower in the water to go under any future bridge, which is an additional turn.
Well, the only thing dredging the river is going to do is allow ships to pass through that have a deeper draft.
Yeah,
it's not going to allow the ship to float lower in the water. The buoyancy of a ship is dependent upon what its cargo is. Okay,
Well,
they don't take on
displacement.
Right,
Well,
it's displacement. It doesn't take on ballast like a submarine. It's not gonna sit lower in the water unless it has more cargo in it. The only thing dredging the water remember, the ship is going to float at the surface. Dredging it is only going to allow the ship that has a deeper draft, a deeper draft to go through there. Like aircraft carriers have a much deeper draft than a destroyer does.
Right.
Okay. An aircraft carrier can't pass through 30 feet of water. It's got to pass through a draft of 60 feet. So
Well,
if you dredge it, it doesn't make the ship go lower.
No, it won't cause the ship
wait a minute. And I'm not deep in my knowledge of, maritime architecture, but I am aware they all do have ballast. They all do have some ballast. They do have
but
some
it's not
ability
going to cause the ship to ride lower in the water.
Right. Ballast is designed to keep the
ballast
ship
is
upright.
basically used when they're in storms to help them keep upright with the waves.
Okay, so I misunderstood. I thought the ballast had more of an impact, somewhat like more with submarines, where it allows them to have a ability to be lower or higher in the water based on their ballast, besides just keeping it even keel. I can be wrong.
No,
nothing wrong, but this is how we learn. This is how we have these conversations.
If you look at the front of any of these ships and you see that the bow break in the front, where you have that bulb that produces out from the bow of the ship, okay, is this large round object that comes out. That's at the keel. You'll see a chart above it, and where that chart is, it rides at the waterline. That chart indicates how much of the ship is in draft, which means how much of the ship is below water. The chart goes higher. The lower the ship is in the water, it will tell you how many feet of draft, how many feet of the ship's
is underwater.
Is under the water. That only goes up and down based upon how much cargo or weight the ship is carrying. You have an empty ship, it rides higher in the water.
Mm-hmm.
The ballast means more when a ship isn't laden with cargo, because that ballast at the base of the ship in the belly of it is what's helping it keep it vertical. When a ship is down deeper in the water, there's more of the ship in the water. It's going to stay more stable.
And it needs less ballast.
And it doesn't need the ballast because now the cargo is the ballast.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, but you can understand where my reasoning is coming from.
Right.
Now, basically, ballast is there to help lower the ship's center of gravity.
Right. Now, when you have these waterways, right, you have a channel that's dug out.
Mm-hmm.
meant to accommodate the ships that pass through it. Over the years, these waterways have been dredged, and usually what they do is they dredge right up the middle of the channel.
Mhm.
You're not going to dredge the whole channel. You're
Right.
talking about billions of yards of material that has to come out of there. And when you dredge that much material out of there, all those caissons that are down there that hold the bridge supports, they need that soil that's around
Mhm.
them, keeps
Right.
them stable. So you can only dredge out a certain amount from between those caissons so that that valley is there to support, is there to keep compressing on those caissons between that and the water pressure. That's what keeps them there. So and you also remember most of these things right now are already down at bedrock. Most
Right.
of these places, like for instance, you know the Susquehanna River.
Mhm.
All right. You remember the floods we had up in upstate New York in 2011, right?
Oh yeah, I remember
And
that very well.
right. The plans were let's dredge the river. You can't. The river is already at bedrock. There's nothing to dredge. You're looking at solid earth, solid stone or that river has been dredged out for tens of thousands of years of water current chewing away. That's all that's left is the rock. There's nothing to dredge. They can make the river wider by removing topsoil and displacing the water, but you can't do that in these places because that's where the docks are. The
Right.
only thing they can do is, okay, well, that ship is too goddamn big. That's why look at what they did. Look at what they did with the canal. They had to basically rebuild the entire canal down what do you call it?
Erie
The
Canal. You mean
the
Erie?
no the Suez Canal, all that is. They had to
No, no, no.
rebuild all those and widen them and bring them lower because the ships got too big. They couldn't fit them into the locks.
Mhm.
These canals were designed in the early 1900s when the ships were 40 or 50 feet wide and 400 feet long. Now you got ships that are 1,400 feet wide that are 120, 1300 feet long, 120 feet wide, have a draft of 80 feet. They can't get through.
Right.
Right. So
No, I get it. It's again, my thought is just that again, there are people with solutions, or people are trying to come up with solutions. They're trying to look to the future planning, and saying, okay, so when we have this opportunity, maybe this is a discussion. Okay, I'm wrong. Fine. One of the options are out. But here's the thing, we're not getting any of that conversation from the three levels of government that should be having this public conversation very actively with the public to let the public know we're under control. Because I guarantee you, people who read similar articles than I have, and this is coming from a Baltimore newspaper, that they're reading this, they're hearing about these ideas, they're not hearing anything to the contrary, they're not being informed about what is or isn't necessary or capable, and all they're hearing is government's worried about drones taking pictures of the entire event. That's a problem. That's just not giving me confidence. It's one thing to say, okay, no, we did take that into account, and that doesn't work because of XYZ, but we're working on something else. I have confidence. I know you've been able to address a concern that I'm able to make. It's entirely different. And this is the example we need for our entire government. They're not answering the problems that people are easily able to identify. It might be because we lack knowledge. Okay, I'm not a I don't know, oceanographer or whatever the correct term is. I don't know that. I'm not into maritime building ships. I understand that. So just answer the simple question. Give me the knowledge, and then
Oh,
we
I
can move
agree.
forward.
This is knowledge that should be being shared with the public.
well,
For those of you who don't understand what you're looking at up on the screen right now, this is a map of where the Scott Key Bridge went across Chesapeake Bay. So right here if you can see my cursor, this is where the key bridge was.
Yeah.
These white areas is where dredging was, and that's the shipping lanes or the
Mhm.
navigable lanes of these ships. Okay. Now, is my understanding that that ship was coming from this area over here, which you can see a bunch of rail lines here,
Mhm.
and that's where it was coming from. Let me go ahead and blow this up a little bit. Okay. Where am I at?
You're above it. You gotta scroll down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was my understanding that it was coming from this Curtis Bay area. It may have been coming from
On the right.
the South Locust Point Marine Terminal also. Okay. But it was coming from the right. Now, one theory is as it came around and it got down to this port, this bay here, this Curtis Bay,
Mhm.
and it lost power, that it no longer had the pressure of the banks pushing on it. And that can sometimes cause it to draw in towards a channel. And that is one of the thoughts. Okay. Now, all these numbers that you see are depths.
Right.
Okay. And I believe they're in fathoms and not feet.
Most likely.
Okay. But here is where Frank was talking about the pilot boarding and exiting the ship. This purple section, that's where the harbor pilot or the port pilot gets on board of the ships and takes over control.
To bring them in and where they would get off to take them,
Right.
to let them go out.
So odds are, based on this map, that a harbor pilot was under control of that ship at the time of the collision.
Yeah. But that still doesn't answer the concern of, was the ship under a computer attack? Doesn't answer the question of, why wasn't the bridge being regularly upkept with infrastructure to make sure that it would be able to resist a strike of that nature? It doesn't address the question of, okay, where is the mayor, the governor, and the federal government talking about, here are the consequences and here's our initial plans, or that even that we understand the scope of the nature of the problem going forward, even a little bit. And so we have preparation. It's one thing to say, we're working hard. What do you do? Yeah, that's doing something. That doesn't mean you're doing anything effective. You're not telling me that you have an understanding of the problem, saying,
Right.
we're working on it. Yeah, of course you are. And are you
I will-
working on it in the right way or the wrong way? Do you even understand what you're supposed to be working on?
Well,
That's my concern.
honestly, there
Well,
are
here's
at minimum 4 layers of emergency management that should be active on this site right now. The Baltimore Office of Emergency Management, the City of Baltimore, the county, whatever county Baltimore is located in,
Mhm.
they should be active in it as well. The state of Baltimore, the state of Maryland should be active in it as well, along with the federal government Office of Emergency Management. So right there are 4 layers of emergency management that should be actively working this incident. Okay, and they should have been working on it within hours or within minutes of it happening. Okay, within minutes, the Baltimore Emergency Management Office should have been working on it. Within less than an hour, the county Office of Emergency Management should have been working on it. Within under 2 hours, the state should have been working on it.
But
Okay, and that's the way it escalates.
right, but we're seeing that isn't, and
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe That's one of my concerns. Obviously, the money is a concern. What's this? Joanna just put up something. Hang on. Airlines have the FAA. Does the maritime have something similar for investigations to keep this from happening again? Yes, they do.
NTSB is investigating what happened.
And that would be the equivalent of the FAA. So they do.
Well, the NTSB also does investigations on plane crashes. Basically, it's National Transportation Safety Board. And they investigate all major accidents that happen with any type of transportation system, whether it's train, whether it's maritime like this, whether it's a plane that goes down, serious bus accidents, serious accidents with hazardous materials, etc. The NTSB investigates those. Okay, and that's their sole responsibility, is to investigate accidents of this type and determine what happened.
Okay, yeah, like Flight 800,
and then determine what steps can be taken to keep it from happening in the future.
Right.
Here's the one thing that I got to say about this whole thing. If we're going to get into the idea of this being a hack or an attack or anything else like that,
potentially, yeah,
potential. Why is any ship or any plane or car or any other mode of transportation, train, anything, why are any of these things susceptible to hacking of any kind? Propulsion, navigation should all be in-house, completely isolated systems that do not have anything to do with anybody from outside that vessel or vehicle having any control over it.
There are some scenarios where it could be not necessarily beneficial, but it could be argued that outside control should be able to be administered.
But there's also another factor, because you have multiple
30 years ago, we didn't have this kind of bullshit. We're having to worry about your ship getting hacked. Well, you had to worry about your port pilot being a lunatic. That's what you had.
We don't even know if they have systems on board that are capable of being hacked that would have control of these systems.
No, guaranteed they do, because you would have the GPS system. At the very least, you have a GPS navigation system that are interlinked to the computer system that's running the engines themselves. So you could theoretically go through the GPS into the computer to the navigation.
All right. So what happens if you get a satellite drops out? All the ships are going to crash because we're reliant on technology. All the ships are going to crash. These are navigational aids. They're navigational aids. Human beings have been navigating this earth for thousands and thousands of years with nothing but a chart and a star and a sextant. These port captains can go up and down these things with their eyes closed. They can tell what RPM the motors of these ships are going by the feel of the deck. They know what knot they're going. They know what speed they're going. They know what direction they're going. They know these guys do this. This is all they do. So you're going to turn around and say, I'm going to now turn over control over this 850,000-ton vessel to my smartphone that some idiot in Indonesia can have access to because he wrote an app.
Wait a minute. To be fair,
it is ridiculously dangerous, and it is a horrible example of how we're putting too much technology into too many fundamentally simple things that the technology doesn't belong there.
I honestly don't believe it was a hack.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying that it was. I'm not saying that it was, but I'm saying the potential does exist. But
there is, and I think it's highly remote.
I'm
Um,
saying the potential need not exist.
No,
These
I
need
understand, but
isolated systems.
let me also address something of what you said, Frank. In that one, you're talking about individuals who are seasoned, older individuals who have been who were around before the dedication, the compliance, the requirement of all this technology existed. Newer captains can't do the things that the older captains, the older
Then they
captains could do all that. New ones can't. It's
Well, then
like,
whose fault is that?
well,
Because
that's a different
because
question.
if you're going to now interject all of this technology to replace humans,
Mhm.
and human instinct. I mean, all right, look at that. What is the flight that crashed into the Hudson over
Yeah.
there?
Mhm.
All right, how many simulations did they run in that trial to try and figure out how to make everything happen? Nobody could do what that one pilot did. One pilot
Mhm.
had the instinct to know exactly what to do in a split second. 35 years of experience put him in that place at the right time to do it. He
Right.
was the only guy that could possibly done it. And they said, "Oh, well, all of these test subjects were able to do it." Yeah, they knew a bird strike was going to happen. They knew they were going to lose all their engines. They knew exactly when and where it was going to happen. They knew how far out they were from the airport. They knew what their altitude was. They knew everything. Yeah, Sully Sullenberger. He
Yeah.
knew all of these test pilots are able to replicate what he did, had the benefit of all this technology showing them what happened. Okay. But when you take all that technology away, it was the human factor that saved the lives of those people. It was the
Mhm.
human factor that landed that plane correctly. And when you put all this technology in place and you take the human factor out, when you have technology that fails, you're going to cost lives. You're going
well,
to cost billions of dollars.
and
Look,
actually,
These systems need to be
when technology
independent.
fails, it's typically a human factor that causes it to fail because it wasn't maintained properly.
there's that. Look, I'm not going to go and suggest that we need to become Luddites completely. I do agree that we have an over reliance on technology, especially in our military. That's one of my major concerns because we've built too much technology. We've built our military too dependent on technology and not enough on soldiers getting the job done. And I think it's far too, and this is why we see the Taliban, who have no technology, are able to fight us effectively for decades, just like they did the Russians for decades, because they don't have technology to rely on. They're just people. And technology is great for certain things, but you want to take a city, you need people, not technology. And we misunderstand that. And I think that's the problem for future battles and future conflicts going forward is we're going to see that the more technologically dependent nations are going to lose in certain scenarios more consistently. I mean, same thing with Vietnam. We had the better planes. We didn't have the better pilots, per se, as I understand. And our over reliance on technology hurt us, didn't help us. But that's another thing. Let me shift a little bit because we've been talking about this boating accident. It's not going to be the last time. We're going to be talking about that more going forward. But it kind of also makes me think about another problem that we had, where again, it's government failing to do its job properly.
Well, also, and another part of it too,
What?
and let's call a spade here, is government requirement of specific systems
Well, again,
for
that's the same problem.
navigation and etc.
Yeah, it's the government getting in the way of what we really need. They're load down on all this stuff that's by the time they even mention it, it's obsolete and behind the technology curve. Private business can be more ahead than anything government would regulate. But let me shift because in the same way that we have government in this case with the bridge that is helping to cause a problem going forward, we have another situation that happened just about 5 days ago. Representative Thomas Massey actually just commented on this. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. 1 second. Bang. So, as you can see right here, Thomas Massey was talking about the red flag law, the expansion of the red flag law that happened just this weekend on Saturday. And he agrees with my position. Now, for people who don't know, there is no national red flag law, sometimes called an ERPO or an emergency risk prevention order. Doesn't exist on a national level. Every time it's been put up for a national level by Democrats and Republicans, it has always been shot down, which is the right answer. But 21 states do have it now, including Washington, D.C. And red flag laws are, quote unquote, supposed to stop or reduce suicides with a firearm. And this is the one they always sell it on, to end mass shootings and mass shootings, whether that's schools or anywhere else, and to cut gun violence. It doesn't. It never has. They've been around since 1999, created by the state of Connecticut, followed by Indiana. And there has been one study out of several studies, only one that says maybe red flag laws can positively impact suicide rates, but they're not sure. And every other study that has been done, including by Duke University, including by University of Indiana, have all stated that it doesn't work on suicides. It definitely, all of the studies say it doesn't work to prevent mass shootings, whether at schools or anywhere else. It is not effective at gun control at all, but states are doing it. It's literally the state having the ability to take away your Second Amendment rights, take away your property, to take away your children. This is confirmed. I've talked to many politicians who voted for the red flag laws. I've talked to lawyers from across the country, including in Washington, D.C., of every political stripe you can think of. They have all confirmed, yes, if a red flag takes place in a family with children, the state is required to take your children, and they have done that. Even Connecticut I've spoken to the government of Connecticut and Indiana. They have confirmed that they do take children from their families. This is what red flags do. No crime has been committed. There is no crime required for this, and there is no penalty for someone putting a red flag action against you, and being wrong. But here's the thing. This weekend, Saturday, in the middle of the night, very quietly on Saturday, Attorney General Merrick Garland created a new department. He created a department of red flag laws, of the emergency risk protection orders. Don't know how much money. He's spending tens of millions of dollars. We don't know what the price tag is, to pay states for creating red flag laws and for taking American citizens and putting them on the lists and taking away their rights. He's funding that and hoping that it will convince other states to do what he can't pass by law. Congress won't pass this, so they're going to bribe. No. And state by state, they are trying to bribe each state to do this and to put people onto the list, to take away their rights. And the more people they do that to, the more money they're going to get from the federal government. This is literally cutting Congress out of, they're making a law, cutting Congress completely out of it, and they're putting a financial incentive on it for the states to punish citizens for exercising their Second Amendment right. Yep. Thomas Massey agrees with me.
And I concur with everything you just said, Michael. And we've talked about this before on this show.
Yes.
That red flag laws violate literally every amendment of the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
Along with the 14th Amendment and several others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on all this because, like I said, we've discussed this before in the past.
People can look it up. Older shows, we've covered it.
Right. But here's the other thing. Okay, and this is why they are doing this, trying to do this end run around the Constitution, and they've done this before. Okay, they did this when they created the national speed limit of 55 miles an hour. If you will actually look at the history of that, it was not a federal law. that actually created the national speed limit of 55 miles an hour. It was state laws that created that. And the states were basically coerced into creating that 55 mile an hour speed limit in order to receive a certain amount of federal highway funds. And if they refused to create that 55 mile an hour speed limit, then the federal government would withhold those funds from them. The same happened with the national seatbelt law. If you will actually look into it, there is no national seatbelt law. There is a law to fund seatbelt wearing programs from the federal government, but there is no federal requirement for the wearing of seatbelts. Those are all state laws. And if the states refuse to have seatbelt laws on the books, the federal government will then withhold a certain portion of their funds away from them. And this is where the federal government is acting outside of its authority in granting these funds for these programs that they have no authority over. They've done it with seatbelt laws. They've done it with helmet laws. They've done it with other laws as well. Okay. Drunk driving laws. Okay. The drunk driving law used to be different in just about every state had different drunk driving laws, ranging from 0.08 up to, I think it was 1.2 in some states. Okay. And until the federal government stepped in and said, all states will have a drunk driving law of 0.08, or we will withhold highway funds from said state that does not enact that law. Okay. Again, the federal government has no authority to set those laws, but they coerce states into setting these laws because it gets states reliant on certain federal monies. And then when states don't enact what they want, then they threaten to withhold those funds from them. Okay. This is where our federal government is acting way outside of its authority, and it's bypassing the rights of the states.
Oh yeah. And people don't know that it's happening. People don't know. Again, if this was, and to those people who say, well, no, this is a great idea, it's going to help, then why did they do it on a Saturday when no one was aware and it wasn't covered by any of the mainstream news media? You can go to MSNBC, CNN, they didn't cover this. They didn't talk about this. And they did it on a Saturday when no one was paying attention to the news. So why are they doing it in secret? Because they know that if they were to have a national debate about it, if people were aware of what these red flags do in all of their consequences, and the fact that there is no need for a crime to be committed for you to be punished as if a crime had been done, they would lose. That people would notice that this is coercing of the states by giving them an incentive to punish citizens so they can get cash. And we're talking about New York, California, Illinois, again, Maryland, many of these cash-strapped states that are in debt, that need money desperately, especially those that have open borders or support sanctuary city and state statuses. They're inundated with illegal aliens. They're desperate to have more money coming in. And if that means that they have a red flag law and then they suddenly go out and just pick several thousand citizens just so that they can get the bonus money from the federal government, they'll do that. And they are doing that. And this is really voter nullification. This is nullification of American citizens' rights. And it's evil. This is why Representative Thomas Massie, who's mostly a libertarian, is up in arms about this. He's one of the only members of Congress that I've heard of that actually mentioned this. And, you know, as I said, he agrees with me. I did an entire video going over this on Saturday. Why? Because no one knew about it. This is evil. This is bad. And we need to be aware of these kinds of things that are happening behind our back that the mainstream news media doesn't want to talk about. People need to talk about this.
And Joanne brings up a very good point here. Okay, you have a right to confront your accusers. Red flag laws do not allow for that.
True. There is no to explain the red flag laws as quickly as I can for people. And yes, I am one of the top people in the nation in covering red flag laws since 2018. Yes, I am. I've done the research. Every red flag law in the country all have the same essential components. One of those is an individual, which is sometimes a family member, a police, a law enforcement officer. It can, in several states, be
A member of community trust. Okay,
a member
which
of the
would be
community.
police, fire, EMS, some healthcare worker, teachers can be extended into this, and in some cases, clergy.
Yes. So again, it depends on how each state defines it, but in general, yes. And in some cases, it can be any random citizen who has a concern. Will go to their police department, they'll put in the red flag action and say, hey, this person may have bought a baseball bat, a fork, a hammer in the last 6 months. That's each of these items have been used as a means of committing murder. So they're considered dangerous weapons in most states. Yes, I know, a fork. People have been killed with forks, therefore they can be a dangerous weapon and justify red flag action. You are never notified of this. So they go to the court, they talk to a judge. I am unaware of any state at any time denying a red flag action, because if they do and they're wrong, they're going to be sued and they're going to be vilified. They always pass the red flag law. You still haven't been notified. The police are then given a warrant to come to your home to take your property. And
Actually, there was
that
a mass shooting incident where the police technically had the authority because somebody had reported this individual, and I forget what state it was, is fairly recently. But they did not execute a red flag warrant on this individual, even though they had numerous complaints on this individual.
Florida and New York. The Buffalo shooter is one of them, and Florida had one as well.
Joanna Patterson, I put up that that you said it's illegal. No, actually, it's not illegal. It's legal because a law was passed. It is unlawful. Okay. And the reason why it is unlawful is because it is contrary to the Constitution of the United States and contrary to multiple state constitutions.
Right.
Okay. If you actually read into how these red flag laws are written and enacted, and you read these state constitutions, you will find that the majority of these red flag laws also are contrary to the state constitutions.
I would say, and I've read 19 of them, including DC. So there's the two most recent states I haven't read. Well, all of them, except for those two that I've read, all of them violate the constitutions of the states as well as the Constitution of the United States. They all have the same premise. They deny due process. You're not notified until someone knocks on your door with a warrant to take your property. You never get a chance to defend yourself. You never get to confront the accuser. There is no any proof necessarily presented against you. There is no one there to defend you. The evidence can be arbitrary, and therefore this is an extreme action. There's so many levels. Literally, I have spent years talking about this and covering this and doing the research on this. It's crazy. So it is, yes, it's legal. It's unconstitutional. It's a violation of state and federal constitution. And again, let me emphasize, This was done behind the public's back. Attorney General Merrick Garland did this when no one was paying attention. He has not bothered to mention it to the public at large. Yes, if you went over to the congressional website, you see it. No one checks that. The media didn't cover this. He did this knowing that the public would not be informed so that they would be able to take advantage of the public. That tells you how bad this is. If it was good, they'd have no problem going prime time, noon, having the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, to discuss this, to bring it up in front of all of the news media, to have their questions. They'd have no problem having a press conference about this, which he can do at any time that he wants. Be on CNN and talk about it. They don't want to answer the questions. They don't want to have to confront the public about this. They just want to punish and take the power. It's an abuse of power.
Joanne, yes, our freedom is under siege. And yes, Reagan did try to tell us about that problem, as have many presidents prior to him. In fact, the majority of our founding fathers have warned us against this. And it was very, very detailed out in both the Federalist Papers and the Federalist Papers that a lot of what we're seeing happen in our government today. In the Federalist Papers, they try to say that it could never happen because the Constitution doesn't authorize it. In the Anti-Federalist Papers, they actually warned us that this could happen. And we failed to learn from them. And now we are seeing the results of our failing to heed those warnings appropriately.
It's crazy to me that we're seeing this happen and no one's talking about it. And think about it. There was just, 3 days ago? Let me confirm. It was March 26th. So 3 days ago, a man was killed in the New York subway. We've had people who've been stabbed. We've had people who've been shot, pushed on. Mind you, we have the National Guard. They're supposed to protect us.
Yeah.
We've had people who are being shot, including the police officer in New York. We just had the wake. I'll get to that in a second, because he got shot. The red flag laws didn't protect anyone. In fact, if you go to the New York, it's the Gun Involved Violence Elimination Report, often called the GIVE report, comes out twice a year, every year. You will see that while you'll hear Kathy Hochul say gun violence is down, not quite. See, gun violence is down versus 2020 when it hit an all-time peak. But if you compare 2023, the last full year of data,
it's like inflation's down.
Well, same thing. It's the
yeah,
same,
it's
same
down
thing.
from the peak.
Yeah, it's down from the peak.
Not down.
Yeah, but if you compare it to 2019, before we had the BLM riots, before we had the violence of the autonomous zones, if you compare 2023 to 2019, we're up. Gun violence is up in every category. And we had the red flag laws since 2018. It didn't protect anyone. They're misquoting the data to give you this false impression of safety and ignoring the fact that they're making the situation worse.
No, they're not misquoting the data. They're being selective with their data choices.
Well, I would count that as misquoting. If you're looking at 2020 and not saying, by the way, that's the all-time peak, it's abnormal and was because of BLM riots and autonomous zones, and the normal trend from 2013 to 2019, we're above both the trend and the actual numbers. You're misquoting. The data's there, but you're misquoting it. You're giving a false impression.
And that's often what our politicians do, regardless of what side they are on.
Yeah, and they think people don't know.
Pick the data they use. They don't use, and that's what we're seeing also a lot with the climate change arguments. They're being selective on what data they're using.
Yeah, and that's why it's in courts right now. The hockey stick chart is under dispute in courts because they cherry pick the data. I know a lot of, and there's people who say, "Oh, but I don't own a gun." If the government can do this, the main reason why everyone in America should be concerned about this, if they can do this on one law, they can do it with any law. If they can go behind your back and incentivize states to punish you, and they have in the past, but if they get to do this again on something so fundamental as your Second Amendment rights, there is nothing they can't do this to. Everyone's at risk, which is why they did it in the middle of the night with behind your back. Everyone is at risk.
Right. Exactly. So, we've talked about the bridge. We've talked about what's going on with red flag laws. Let's talk about what happened with Biden and Trump and the campaigns.
Well, there's a couple of things. There's the thing that just came out just before we got on, which is about a video. But there's also the fundraiser from yesterday.
And that's what I wanted to get at first off. Okay. Isn't Biden and pretty much the whole Democratic side saying that the wealthy have to pay their fair share? They have to pay their fair share, have to pay their fair share. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this gala dinner fundraising event that they just had, where I think the minimum cost of a plate was $100,000, and they were upwards of $1 million a plate for this fundraising event. Does that sound like it has any involvement with the middle class?
Middle class weren't invited to this. They raised $26 million, and that's a huge amount of money from a single fundraising event. And this was targeted towards the ultra wealthy. That's why they did it in New York State, in New York City, one of the capitals of progressivism and democratic bluer than blue ideology. And they targeted the rich to use against the public. So on that basis, it is a slap in the face about their principles of protecting the poor and trying to just redistribute wealth. At the same time, there's another problem with it or the thing that really got me upset about this. You've got Obama, who's known for, bombing Americans overseas with drones. You've got Clinton, who's known for Epstein Island and his trips there. We've got Biden, who's known for falling over everywhere. These three people came together, three powerful presidents, very influential to a segment of the American public. Not one of them went to the wake of the policeman who was killed doing his job protecting the public from a criminal who was subject to the bail reform, prison reform, had been arrested 21 times, 9 felonies. They caught him. The guy was preparing to go back to prison. His cohort in the car had 14 arrests, and they were planning to commit another crime when they were confronted by the police officer. And not one of these former presidents had the presence of mind or the interest in going to this man's wake to speak to their family. It's exactly the same thing as when we saw Kamala Harris when she went to Tennessee. She didn't go there to talk to the parents of the 3 9-year-olds that were killed by the Tennessee trans shooter. No, she went there to protect the Democrats in the Tennessee state legislature. She didn't care about the parents. Well, these guys didn't care about the police, about protecting the public, about the danger of recidivism, of criminals continuing to commit more and more crimes as they're not going to jail. No, they didn't want to talk about that. They didn't want to address that. Instead, they went and raised money so that they could maintain more power. Well, why should you have more power if you can't effectively use it? And we have criminals that are being released over and over again to commit more and more crimes that wind up killing people. I'm sorry, that pissed me off.
Okay.
Well, the one thing that there was it was funny. Who was that? Eric Swallowwell. What the hell
Yeah.
is his name?
Swallow.
Mr. Fang Fang over there.
Mhm.
He's
Yeah,
over there-
Swallow.
Yeah, he's all over Twitter making a big hoo ha over. Oh, look at Obama with Biden and Clinton, and oh, look, you don't see Trump having this kind of entourage. And then everybody, say, no, his entourage is the family of the slain officer who he went to mourn with. That's who his entourage was.
Yeah.
And the one I know, I hate to see when funerals get used for political purposes. I really do. I hate seeing it. Now, it's one thing if politicians are actually going to go and be genuine about, saying that they're sorry, and sharing in the emotion of the day. Is one thing if it's like that. It's another thing when they turn them into media circuses.
Mm-hmm.
And who was that? I forgot what name of the guy in the Clinton Obama administration. Some guy died, and they made a big hoo-ha. It was like they turned it into a campaign event at the funeral. I forgot which one it was. I'll think of it eventually. But I saw somebody trying to make it a campaign event today. Hochul.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Hochul showed up there today, tried to make it a campaign event. Shows up there with her 4 bodyguards and her press agent and something else, and somebody, a family member or something, whom I saw greeting Trump earlier in the day, got into it with her, got right
She
in her
left after
face
10 minutes.
and told her pretty much, you are not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
Your policies, the policies of your mayor of New York City, are part and parcel the reason why our family member is in a box.
Mm-hmm.
You did this to our family, and you're going to show up here and use it as a photo op? Said, you're not welcome here. Don't you dare disgrace us with your presence. And was summarily told to leave.
Yeah.
And then everybody who was in attendance cheered her leaving.
Yeah. That was within the first 10 minutes of her being there.
Yeah. I am so glad that at least someone had, there was some courage somewhere for some family to come out and say enough is enough. It was so refreshing to see, and I just hate that it came on such a horrendous occasion.
Yeah. But, and I know some people will excuse that, what happened to Hochul, as an excuse to say, well, that's why the presidents didn't show up. No, that's not it. Because, first of all, Obama and Clinton aren't responsible for the New York laws that led to this police officer losing his life, at least not directly. They may support those policies, but they're not the ones, they weren't in charge of New York State. Hochul was. And perhaps if they did show up and they were able to learn from the family members the consequences of their failed policies, these failed progressive ideologies, maybe they could then say something and change it on a national level to get redress on this. But they didn't have the balls to do that. More importantly, they didn't care. There is no empathy from any of them. Biden could have made a statement while he was there, going into the fundraiser, coming out of the fundraiser. He could have made a statement. He could have sent any of his staffers. He could have sent Kamala. There's no reason why Kamala and Michelle and Hillary couldn't have all gone over to that event and saying, our husbands couldn't be here, but we're here. We sympathize with you, even for 2 minutes. There's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for it. They don't care. This is all about power. It's about money, and it's about you, the American citizen, being railroaded into one idea. It's a fortification of the election, and you're not supposed to question it. You're not supposed to say, you know what, that reflects poorly on them, and it's really insane that they wouldn't. Each and every one of them have a comment and publicly share their sadness for this member of law enforcement doing his job. It's upsetting to me. It's very upsetting to me.
Oh, the funeral I was speaking of before was the Paul Wellstone Memorial. I don't know if you remember that name, Paul Wellstone. Yeah, he was he was an FAA guy or something like that who was involved in the Clinton administration and stuff like that. Yeah, it was it was ridiculous. He was supposed to have this funeral for this guy, and it was supposed to turn it into a somber event. And every Democrat that went there turned it into like a church revival. You know, it was like film the Blues Brothers movie. You know, do you see the light? You know, while they were doing this, and it turned it into a big political rally while they were over there.
Well, they do that with every mass shooting, every school shooting.
No, this was, you know, they do it with mass shootings, but at least there's still a little reverence there. They turned this into a circus. It started out as a somber event and turned into a full-blown circus. It was like a stand-up routine that they were doing over there. It was absolutely horrible. I was like, if this was my family member and this is what they were doing at that funeral, oh, good Lord, there would have been more than one funeral held that day. I can tell you that.
It's crazy. It's just crazy. And there are Democrats who are voting for this that love this. They're so happy about the way that Hochul and Biden and Clinton and Obama, the way that they're abusing the public, how they're running away from being effective or efficient or even accountable for their actions.
And here's how ineffective they actually are. And this is something that a lot of you won't know right up. Okay. Over the last year, there have been multiple UAW strikes across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Every one of the big name politicians came out in support of those UAW strikes. Right?
Yeah. Oh.
So this is from the Detroit News. I'm getting ready to share it here real quick. Okay. Oh, it's not going to let me. So never mind. Basically, UAW membership hits lowest point since the Great Recession.
Okay. So people are leaving the union.
Okay. So most unions really grew during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Because of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Okay. And for the UAW to hit its lowest membership point since the Depression is very telling, especially considering that unions had a huge boost shortly after World War II as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So, on all fronts, everything that they try to quote unquote improve is going backwards. It's failing. They fell on the economy. They fell on unions. They failed on inflation. I mean, literally, they failed on foreign policy. Literally everything that this administration has touched has declined.
because they're so busy trying to look good for the next election.
Actually, I shouldn't say decline, has gotten worse.
Wow. Almost the
Okay,
same
because
thing.
crime didn't decline, it increased.
Well, yeah, good point. But it's the reason why we're having these negative consequences is that the Biden administration and its many backers are so desperate for votes that they will do anything. They need progressives. They're so desperate for the progressive vote that they will corrupt everything. Again, I point to, we see this, the Michigan primary tells us exactly what they're doing. On Super Tuesday, what did they do? 101,000 progressives wrote in uncommitted. And that was Donald Trump got 759,000 votes for the primary. Joe Biden got 632,000 votes for the primary. There were 101,000 progressive votes that went uncommitted, wrote in uncommitted, so that they could send a message to Joe Biden. He needs those votes to be competitive at all with Trump in a swing state, Michigan. And therefore, 2 days later, in the State of the Union, what did Joe Biden do? He decided to build a port for Hamas, a terrorist organization that killed 34 Americans, have 22 Americans that they are torturing as hostages as we speak. And he did that so he could get those 101,000 votes. One, your vote matters a hell of a lot. And two, Biden doesn't care. He just wants the vote. Just like in New York yesterday, he wants the money. He wants the power. He doesn't care about the consequences that a cop died or that Americans are being taken hostage in foreign lands, that America's falling apart on every single target. He has nothing he can point to that his administration has put forward that has actually worked. Nothing. He doesn't care. He just needs to look good to his base to get through the election, and his base are screaming, and they've got the mainstream media screaming, "Orange man bad," all day long, every day, on every channel, every time they speak to the public, so that they hope people will do what they did in 2020, anyone but Trump, and this is the consequence of that. And that's what they're hoping to duplicate. That's what the fortification is for. Anyone but Trump. Biden is, and no one agrees with Biden. Everyone can see how blatantly horrible he has been, but he's not orange man bad, and they hope that gets him through the election. This is sad. Go ahead.
Okay. What I've got up on the screen right now is from the United States Chamber of Commerce. Union membership reaches another record low in 2023. Okay. All the way through this administration, even though they have, quote unquote, the most pro-union occupant of the White House ever, union membership continues to decline year over year.
I'm not surprised. Again, here they are. They're sending the cops for me again. But I'm not surprised. Like, everything they have touched, they don't care about. They didn't care in East Palestine, Ohio.
No.
They didn't care at our southern border.
No.
They don't
They don't
care
care at the northern border either.
Any border, for that matter, any border. They don't care about Americans overseas. Name the country. Look at what they're doing to us. They just want power. And that was exemplified yesterday. It was
The
a
only reason why
display of
they
power.
care about Ukraine is because they're afraid of what secrets will come out of Ukraine.
Yeah. I think that would be more realistic. That's the real fear that I think. It's not about Russia. It's definitely not about protecting the European Union or NATO. We could have protected them easily. The easiest way we could have protected them, easy. Be energy independent and sell Germany and France our extra gas and oil.
Hey guys,
Or
listen, I'm
all
going
of
to be wrapping up.
Okay,
I'm getting
and that would actually be the biggest impact that we could make towards Russia and China.
Well, yeah.
Listen, guys, I have a little bit of family business I got to tend to this evening, so I'm going to be getting out of here real quick. Dal, to answer your question, Dal wants to know why I keep looking up. 2 days ago, I installed a brand new ceiling fan in my office. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I was unaware that it's a disco light. Okay. I was unaware of this when the purchase was made. It's just a round, self-contained light, a ceiling fan, clear blades, and it has LEDs all the way around it, and they adjust for the tone. And I ordered it specifically for the color tone so that it would work with the camera lighting in here. What I did not know is that the inside ring is also LEDs, and it's 256 colors. And it flashes in various patterns. So, now, what you can't see in my office is across from me is the cat tree. And every time I look over, I see a cat staring up at the ceiling, mesmerized by the disco lights. And then I have to sit and look up and see what the hell the cat is looking at. So if you want to know what it's like, yeah, squirrel.
There you go.
Well, I just said squirrel, and the dogs downstairs started barking.
So my dog just
They must be watching this on the TV in the living room. So I'll post a picture of I'll get a little video of my ceiling fan of what it does, and I'll share it with you guys next week. In the meantime, I've got to get out of here. I have a little bit of personal business I have to take care of on the phone. Check out the YouTube channel at the Range Report today. We put up a really good video today of a brand new Rossi rifle that we just acquired. Really fun rifle. Had a lot of fun with it. Good time. Until I catch you guys next week, be safe, shoot straight, and as always, keep them honest, guys. Keep them honest.
Always trying.
Always.
Hey, fellas, have a great night. You guys be good. Have a good weekend. Oh, and for those of you celebrating
Easter.
He is risen. Happy Easter, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, Mike. So we've gone through the desperation of the Biden administration.
Yeah.
The greed of the Biden administration as on display yesterday.
That fundraiser in New York where they brought Obama and Clinton in is literally a sign of desperation. And there's reports out there that Obama, I guess, is calling the White House pretty much on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, to try to correct the Biden campaign.
Well, he has to, because the Biden campaign didn't actually run a campaign in 2020, so they can't copy what they did last time.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. This time they actually have to present the public Joe Biden. And every time he ran for president prior to that, when the public saw who Joe Biden was, they rejected him. The one time he ran for president, when they didn't show him at all and just said Orange Man bad, he won.
Yeah.
So now he's out and people are looking at him and they're like, you got to find a way to hide him, get him into a basement somewhere so that he doesn't show up in front of the people, because every time he talks, every time he tries to walk across a stage, people go, I don't want to vote for that. which makes a lot of sense to me
Yeah.
because he's fundamentally flawed. And even Democrats know that. Even Democrats will admit that. And they have been for months and months and months.
So here's Frank's light.
Yep, I just saw it. Okay. A little different.
So yeah, this is the light Frank was talking about before he left.
Why am I not surprised that would be the ceiling fan he gets? Yeah, I'm with Dow. Drive me nuts.
Without them.
I could not have that in my house.
No, it would drive me absolutely bonkers.
This is all going crazy.
Some of these gaming setups with all the LED lights and stuff. I'm sorry, I just could not do that.
Well, you have a population that have been so indulged and so mistreated that they have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
My personal opinion, I'm not a doctor, isn't as prevalent as they would like us to believe. It's over medicated. It is over prescribed or identified. I think a lot of this is behavior. You're having a lot more kids being identified and said, well, you're not paying attention. You're ADD or ADHD or whatever it is.
ADHD, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's wrong. As an example, if it was me in third grade, and I've told people this about my life before, in third grade, I used to read my mother would bring home the New York, the Daily News or the Post, and I would read it cover to cover, every word, everything in there. I read encyclopedias on a regular basis. Yes, this is going back to like the 1970s. So there is no cable TV. There is no internet. There's no cell phones. Okay. So I read dictionaries. I read a dictionary. My mother had an unabridged dictionary. It was about yay big, which had an atlas and the description of all the mythologies out there, had all the major gods in it. I read encyclopedias, cover to cover, A to Z, and I read the newspaper every day, cover to cover. But when I went to my third grade classroom, a teacher, Miss Bingy, who I hate, she's a horrible teacher. Miss Bingy, we had the books to help us learn reading. And back in the day, they were called the alphabet books. So you'd have like I was in third grade, we had the J book, which is the J in the series of getting more and more difficult words and such concepts into the stories, and you would read them in the room. Well, I had read the entire damn book, including the footnotes, the bibliography, the definitions in the back. I had read it cover to cover. It wasn't hard for me to read. And I was tested for that and found out I had college level reading skills in third grade. She didn't know that because we didn't have the test results back. She thought, oh, so I didn't know how to read. She was convinced and tried to convince my mother that I didn't know how to read because I wasn't paying attention in the class when she was going over the J book that I had read cover to cover. And if in the 1970s we had the same policies we have today, they would have said I had ADD or ADHD and said I need to be medicated, when in fact I was just bored. That's the problem going forward. That's the problem with our education system. I really think so.
Yeah. Oh, well, I agree.
Ask away. Okay. Ask away, Duran.
And they another big problem with our educational system is they no longer teach you how to think. They teach you what to think.
Oh, very much. Very much. It's very much an indoctrination.
And I think that is one of the biggest detriments to our society today. It takes a while because there is a lag. So Joanna, whenever you do get that question, go ahead, please post it so we can get it answered. So, going on, we are going to see a further decline as things move ahead over the year. Okay. I don't think this is the last incidents where we're going to see government literally fall on its face, as like we're seeing with the Key Bridge.
No, it can't be, because it's all based on we did something, but yet there's no efficiency, no accountability, no efficacy that's behind it. So yeah, they're doing useless things that don't improve anything. That's why we're going to see it go. Oh, Joanne has a question for me. She says, do you believe our freedoms are being removed and they can't do it with its out rebellion, or do it without rebellion? So they are causing all of this. Okay. So first part of your question, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of your question is, do I believe that our freedoms are being removed? Yes. The red flag laws is one big example of that. The censorship that is being promoted by the federal government, whether they call it misinformation, disinformation, the Disinformation Governance Board. If you're looking at Senator Richard Blumenthal and his efforts to try and have a government censorship over the internet, yeah, I absolutely believe we are losing our rights on multiple fronts more and more every day as they adhere to DEI and all these other progressive ideologies. You can't have them exist at the same time. They break the Constitution.
Well, and they need a certain level of rebellion in order to justify taking away more and more of our freedoms. That's what we are literally seeing as a result of the January 6th incident.
Well, fear. It feeds into the fear.
Exactly.
Aren't you afraid
they need
of
a
those
certain
others?
amount of rebellion. They capitalized upon the 2020 riots to further take away some of our rights. And they are capitalizing on January 6th to justify taking away even more of our rights. They're also capitalizing on the quote unquote mass shootings and make sure they're highly publicized to further their agendas, as well as removing more and more of our freedoms. You're also going to start seeing them capitalizing on AI. Okay, and they've already hinted at this because of quote unquote deep fakes.
That's not the problem with AI. The true fear of AI. I had a conversation on Larry Sharp's program on his Monday panel discussion. And we were talking about AI, and I forget the woman's name. She brought it up. So it's not my thought, but it is, I think, relevant. The biggest problem with AI isn't the deep fake. It's the fact that people will say the truth is now fake.
Yes.
And people will assume, well, it must be an AI. The denial of the truth will be assumed to be true, and that the true facts were the fake information. That's the fear, especially when you have a generation that is so indoctrinated to believe what they are told without having critical thinking, without asking critical questions,
and without having proper research skills.
Yeah, they don't know how to look for that information, and that's what we will see. And I've had people in my live stream on Sundays. I had a guy said, Mike, I don't believe, we were talking about inflation. Joe Biden during the State of the Union said America had the lowest inflation rate in the world. That's a blatant lie. It's fundamentally a lie. And I had someone said, well, Mike, you don't know that. You don't know that's true, and you can't prove that, and that's not real. I spent 5 minutes doing a Google search for credible sources listing the interest rates of the world, of each country in the world. There are 14 first world nations that have lower inflation rates than the United States. That includes Japan, China, United Kingdom, and France. Just off the top of my head. He didn't know where to look. So he assumed it had to be false. I had to be making it up because he didn't know how to search for it. But I just had to have the right keywords to bring it up. The first 2 tries didn't bring up a list of the world inflation rates, just US inflation rates. Third try, I got the world numbers done. He didn't know how to research. That's the problem. So it goes right to your point, Mike. Let me answer this. Let me answer the second part of her question, which is, so they need a rebellion. So this is about the rebellion. And I think they're counting on the fact that all of America will not want to rebel at the same time. See, it's a calculation. There are so many different peoples and ideas and organizations and ideologies in America. We have a piece of the entire world. Every idea, every ideology, every religion, every type of people all exist in America. 330 million people. We are unique in the world. No country has the kind of diversity that we have naturally inherent in our populations. But going with that is the differences in cultures and acceptance of different values and issues. And the more we have been trained to be hyphen Americans instead of just being an American, when we were 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the mid 90s, we were all Americans. Then as we got into the 21st century, we started becoming hyphen Americans. And with that hyphenation meant that we were circling around these ideas. Oh, I'm African American or Irish American, Italian American, Pakistani American, whatever the group is. Doesn't matter where you're from. And you're circling on those ideas instead of America, the Constitution, our unified desire. Now it's, I want to be Pakistan in America. I want to be Japanese in America, which meant that our values are separating from each other. And now you can be divided because whatever pisses off the Japanese, those Japanese in America, well, that's not going to be pissing off the Pakistani in America as much. It's not going to be the same as the Jews in America or the Christians in America, whatever the group is. So they're counting on each of these groups
further to set us into divergent groups and to further separate us is what it is. Okay. And on 9/11/2001, we were no longer African Americans or Irish Americans. We were Americans.
Yeah, we were.
And that's literally what it is. That's what a lot of this is. It is to divide us and to categorize us into different subclasses to give us a sense that we are not united.
That's what equity is about. That's what equity is for. It is constantly dividing us into smaller and smaller groups that are pitted against each other for advantage from the federal government, to get their handouts, to get the leverage of whatever it is they want. You're constantly in competition with these smaller and smaller groups of individuals, so no one can unify, because I think if we all did unify, we could improve things.
Oh, we definitely would. Okay, and that's the issues that we are seeing right now is the more they keep us divided, the more we are going to see a decline in this country.
And we are. I mean, we are seeing that, and we will continue to see that. And the problem is, even if we were to, now, here's the part that a lot of people don't think about, is the correction doesn't happen tomorrow. The next election isn't going to fix it, per se. When I say that, I mean, okay, we replace Trump gets reelected as an example, or if it makes you feel better, RFK Jr. or one of the libertarians. I don't care, whomever. Somebody gets elected that's not Biden this year. January, we don't have a clean slate and everything starts over. You still have all the people who were hired by DEI under the Biden administration in our government. We have all of the companies and the state government offices where individuals were hired because of their indoctrination into this progressive ideology. They're going to be there, some of them for 5 years, some of them for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. These are individuals we have to weed out or at least retrain or minimize their impact on the future. So this is a process that takes time, but the more that we are unified in our purpose, the easier it is to correct all of the things they have done to hurt our nation. It is concerted effort. It's not just a one-time thing. It's not just voting in the presidential election, walk away, show up in 4 years and see what happens. No, you have to be involved in this election and the in-between year elections, including the midterm elections. You need to talk to your members of Congress. You have to hold them accountable. You have to be involved in
And
the
get
local.
involved in the people that are running for office,
Yes.
including potentially running for office yourself.
Which is no fun, folks.
Whether that be at the local school board or your town council or your county government, whatever level that is. Okay, because honestly, the only way we're going to start turning this around if more of us start getting involved in the processes.
Well,
right now, the processes are ran by two distinct parties, the Republicans and the Democrats.
Mhm.
Until we start running things as we the people instead of as Democrats and Republicans, we aren't going to see much change.
Yeah. And I hear people a lot of times say, and I've heard this when I talk to libertarians, they're like, well, we can't win. We won't win that election. You don't have to. You don't have to win. As I've heard and talked to libertarians, if the race is close and there's 2% difference between winner and loser, and you've got 5% of the election of that voting base, you have the power. If you have a faction that is in demand, as an example, the progressives in Michigan, they don't control America. They don't control the Democratic Party. And yet, because Biden needs their vote for November, they are able to wield their power, and they got a multi-million-dollar port being built for terrorists in Gaza. That's power. We can win in many of these battles without having to win everything. Don't think of it as a winner takes all. It's we build and we build. And you can do it, and you have the power to do it right now, which is why they're so terrified.
Okay. And this is a perfect segue. Find yourself a group that you believe in and get involved with them. One of those groups can be the Liberty First Foundation. Okay. Because organizations also have the power of numbers. And the larger an organization is, the more pressure they can put on the people that are involved in the quote unquote operation of our country, not the running, but operation of our country. Okay. It's up to us to come together. Okay. And whether it be the Liberty First Foundation, which we are in the process of doing our membership drive, or the Cato Institute, or the 10th Amendment Center, or the NRA, or the Gun Owners of America, or name an organization. Get involved with them. Don't just pay a membership. Get involved. Find out what you can do to help spread this message of freedom and liberty, because that is what's going to start changing things, is when we start bringing our voices together. Okay? As Michael was saying, 100,000 people were able to make an impact. Okay? We can do this. But it takes more than just people like Michael, Frank, and I doing this. Okay? We've got Dow, who is a member. He's also been on this show a lot. He is getting his voice heard. Okay? We've got Jan Rains, Joanna Patterson. I see you in the chat. Okay? This is what it takes. This is what it's going to take to start moving our country back into a direction of serving we the people instead of the people serving our government. And that's what we are seeing right now, is the people serving our government. Okay. Yes, Dow says join Liberty First Foundation. Dow is a member. We do encourage anybody to join Liberty First Foundation. You can find that on our website. Okay. And scrolling across the bottom, l1f.us/register membership drive promotion. Yes, join Liberty First Foundation, because we are using those funds to help expand our voice into other areas so that we can actually reach more people and spread this message of liberty, of service. Okay, because that's ultimately what it comes down to, is citizens being of service to this country. Okay, that's what this country was founded on. It wasn't founded on government. It was founded on citizens serving their country.
Absolutely. I concur completely on that. And it's very important, folks. We can't buy into this idea that we are isolated just because we're unpopular. And the people telling us we're unpopular are the people with the biggest agenda of all. You know, oh, you don't like the Marvels, you don't like Disney Star Wars. Well, that's you. You're there's a problem with you. No, there's millions upon millions. There's a reason why Disney Marvel, Disney Star Wars is losing money hand over fist. It's not because I'm individual, but if you read all the articles, it's just a small group of people, these one outliers. Then why is your movie after movie, TV show after TV show that are promoting these ideologies, why are they failing? Why is no one watching it? Why does no one support that? Because it's not the mainstream. They want you to think that. They want you to comply rather than to question and ask critical questions and to come up with your own conclusion, or to gravitate towards the Constitution and the values that we've always had, or to remember the fact that you are the power of this government. And sometimes it's even 100,000 can shape the policy of the entire nation. It's quite possible. We see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we don't normally see it so obviously, but that's the example.
And we can have a voice. It's just whether or not you're willing to belong to something that's larger than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. We've gone over a lot of stuff. And honestly, folks, until we start coming together as we the people, we will not see anything change. We are here every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We have discussions like this about various topics that are going on across the United States. And we have discussions about how you can actually become involved. Thank you, Joanne. We appreciate it. Okay. We appreciate all the support that everybody gives us. And we look forward to having more of these discussions with you, because honestly, if we aren't having these discussions, then government is going to continue to do what it wants instead of what we need. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.